Hello, and welcome back to Disclosure. Over the course of this series, we've heard from healthcare trainees and professionals navigating disability and health conditions during medical training. We've listened to stories of uncertainty, of weighing whether, when, and how to disclose. We've heard how those decisions shift across different stages of training and different clinical environments. And we've explored how disclosure can be shaped by systems that weren't built with accessibility in mind, amid a healthcare culture that can quietly signal the risks and the rewards of being open about disability. Today, we're asking what comes next. What helps make disclosure feel safe, supported, and meaningful? What conditions allow people to bring more of themselves into their training and work? And what does it look like when disclosure goes well? Not just in theory, but in practice. This is Disclosure, Episode 3.
Section 1. Before disclosure begins.
For many trainees, the process of disclosure begins long before they tell anyone they're disabled. It begins with the systems around them, the forms they encounter, the information they're given, and the ways institutions invite or fail to invite disclosure. Those systems shape more than access. They shape understanding. Many trainees don't know exactly what accommodations they'll need until they begin training. In this next story, a physician assistant student who asked to remain anonymous reflects on navigating a system where accommodations were available in theory but difficult to access in practice. When she reached out for help, she was handed a list of resources. What she needed was expert guidance.
These lists can be so overwhelmingly extensive, which you might think at first is, this is great, there's so many options. But when I have tried to access any of those options, at least at my institution, I felt that it was like, oh, we don't really know what they do. We kind of just figured they'll help you out. You got to try a couple to see what works for you. And to me, that's more things for me to do. I'm asking you for help and you're coming back and asking me, well, which of these will help you? I don't know. You didn't really give me a ton of information. How could I know? This little 2-sentence blurb about what this program does. It doesn't tell me what services they offer or if that is actually applicable to me as a person. And then now I'm spending all this time and energy going through this extensive 30-item list. And that takes time that we already are so limited on.
As the story suggests, clear and accessible support systems are one part of the equation. They help students understand what support is available and make informed decisions without requiring them to navigate every option on their own. But even the best systems have limits. Disability isn't always predictable, and neither are the demands of training. Sometimes, needs emerge only after a student enters a new clinical environment or encounters an unexpected challenge. What happens when students can't anticipate the support they'll need? Or when the pace and unpredictability of clinical training makes it impossible to know what comes next?
Every month you're moving for rotations and different things are expected of you at each one. At surgery, you're expected to stand 12, 14 hours. But then maybe next month I'm in internal medicine and that has me walking and running up the stairs, and maybe residents or the preceptors don't think about, are stairs okay for everybody? And so navigating disclosure changes with every moment, every hour, because it's so dynamic what is expected of you in these very strict roles.
This trainee reflected on the uncertainty of entering new learning environments where expectations shift from one setting to the next. Looking back, they describe how meaningful it would have been to have a conversation before each new experience, one that outlined expectations, acknowledged potential barriers, and explored accommodations before they became necessary.
I really would have liked having it be an open conversation, having it be a genuine space where somebody's like, okay, you are going to be on this rotation. This is what the expectations are. Every day is different, but each day will likely have this frame and structure. How does that work for you? What are your needs? Having that conversation be put out there and introduced by people of higher hierarchies in this academic setting would open up that conversation. And whether a student chooses or not to disclose, at least they know that that space is there and hopefully will remain there. And so if something does come up and the student realizes, oh, I do need to disclose, I do need to have certain accommodations, then that space is open for them to do that. And they know who to go to instead of walking on eggshells until something happens or until an egg cracks.
This reflection highlights another important dimension of disclosure, the confidence that support will be there when it's needed, and that accommodations can evolve as learning environments and circumstances change. For Kaja Siddiqui, that flexibility became the foundation of his clinical training. His institution's willingness to approach accommodations as an ongoing conversation, rather than a one-time decision, made a profound difference in his experience.
Coming to medical school, my first year, I was worried, how am I going to do the different things that we're supposed to do first year? But it seemed like the administration and professors had already met and they figured out a way for me to do these things. The first day I was met with the disability coordinator and she said, okay, let's work on what accommodations you need. And I think a lot of people in my situation don't know what they need until they experience it. Oftentimes, I don't even know what I need until I get to that specific task. Especially now that I'm in third year, things change weekly, and the people that you work with also change weekly. So I have the ability to change the accommodations letter based on what I need that week. And I think that is helpful to have. The first rotation I had was pediatrics, and there I needed to have my own otoscope and ophthalmoscope, and they made sure that there was always an extra pair in the office, and then they made sure that the rotation site that I was assigned to had beds that lowered. So these accommodations are proactive. So I've been privileged to have an institution that's willing to work with me.
Section 2. When leadership makes a difference.
Kaja's story offers a glimpse of what can happen when disclosure is met with flexibility, trust, and willingness to adapt. But that isn't everyone's experience. When institutional systems fall short, or when support is inconsistent, students can find themselves unexpectedly vulnerable. In those moments, the actions of individual educators, supervisors, and clinical leaders can make all the difference. We begin with the story of an anonymous medical student reflecting on their clinical clerkships.
I had come in really excited, a classic med student trying to be helpful. I'd been looking for ways that I could do more things because I felt like I wasn't being given really a whole lot of work. I went to my resident, and in the most non-threatening way I could, I was like, hey, they talked to us today about what they expect out of us as new clerkship students. And I presented it to him, basically asking for more work. And he told me that I couldn't get more work if I didn't stop going to my medical appointments, which I think I'd only gone to like 2 appointments by that time. And I would specifically schedule them on days that, the whole team got off early. And I would always tell the team at the beginning of the day. Basically, I was presented with this dichotomy of do work and get a good grade, or take your accommodations and do badly in the clerkship. And so I stopped going to my appointments, even though they were protected by my accommodations letter, which was disseminated to my whole team. And my health rapidly deteriorated.
The student believed these challenges were reflected in their final clerkship evaluation. When they met with their clerkship director to discuss their concerns, they came away feeling that their account had been met with distrust.
The clerkship director told me that he didn't believe in accommodations because he didn't have evidence of the medical condition that caused them, which is the whole point of an accommodation letter. The whole point is that the person who wrote the letter has seen that evidence. It's to protect the privacy of the student. He was saying he thought that he couldn't know which ones were real or not, so he didn't feel like he could really protect accommodations.
Unsure of where to turn next, the student reached out to another faculty member at their institution for guidance and support.
I told him the whole story and essentially freaked out to him via email. I thought, if anything, the blatant accommodations denial required some sort of remediation because I didn't want it to happen to anybody else. I'm a very vocal advocate for myself. I have no problem standing up for social justice issues, and I've been active in disability advocacy. And so, for someone like me, who has no issue disclosing, and who has no problem saying that I need accommodations, to feel like I can't do that, and to feel like I'm not able to advocate for myself to all these administrative bodies, or even to my resident, then who can do it? I don't think that anybody can. And luckily, that man, who is an extremely vocal advocate for disability in the med school community here and has lots of respect from colleagues, and he himself is disabled, was totally on board with me. He contacted the dean directly and was able to get meetings with people to talk about what went down, to see if there was any sort of this is something terrible that happened. How do we make it not happen? And I'm fairly certain that this was training on disability sensitivities that was given to the clerkship directors to sort of rain down through their departments. I don't know if it was based on my experience, but I hope they were educated on things related to my experience.
When the formal process reached its limits, one faculty leader helped bridge the gap. As the student continued their training, they found that this wasn't an isolated experience. Again and again, it was individual educators who noticed what was needed, offered support, and used their positions to advocate on the student's behalf. Their story is a reminder that while institutional systems create the conditions for equitable access, individual acts of advocacy can profoundly shape how students experience those systems.
I just came from a different clerkship, where I actually expected it to go very badly based on my expectations for the clerkship. I was so nervous about it that I emailed the clerkship director ahead of time to get vibes about what the different sites were like, and to disclose to the clerkship director that, well, I have these disabilities. I'm going to need these accommodations. The director met with me ahead of the rotation to talk through the sites with me and what I was interested in and medically, and also, my different accommodations and needs. And the director completely made it no big deal that I was looking for my accommodations to be met. He said, look, I'll send the letter personally to your teams that you'll be working with. I'll make sure that everybody has a copy and knows that you have these accommodations, and it won't be a problem. And it wasn't a problem. It literally was never a problem. For him, this was such a small thing to do, but it made such a big difference in my experience in the clerkship. They were much more accommodating than I would have imagined.
Section 3. What disclosure can do.
So far in this episode, we've explored the systems, supports, and people that can make disclosure feel possible. But those supports often depend on something that's easy to take for granted: that a trainee recognizes they have a disability, understands that accommodations may help, and knows how to ask for them. For many learners, that recognition takes time. Research has shown that students who are uncertain whether they have a disability experience higher rates of burnout. Other studies have found that nearly half of medical students who identify as disabled are not diagnosed until after they begin medical school. For these learners, the transition into training can be especially challenging, as they're adapting to the demands of medicine while also making sense of a new diagnosis and what it means for their learning. That reality raises an important question. How can educators recognize when an unaccommodated disability may be contributing to a learner's struggles, and respond with curiosity and support rather than assumptions? This next story comes from an anonymous fellow.
I have ADHD. I've often struggled with the more mundane aspects of the job, like paperwork and documentation. I tried to muscle through it, and I didn't formally disclose that there was any reason why this might be particularly difficult for me. However, I ended up getting in trouble in my fellowship for having late notes just too often. This resulted in my department sending me for neuropsychological testing. Even though I already knew that I had ADHD, the results of the testing were very helpful in terms of thinking about specific strengths and weaknesses and coming up with more targeted strategies. They also helped me to accept that things actually do take me longer than I would like or expect, and that in order to be successful, I need to accept that and embrace that I really do need to have strategies and accommodations to make it possible for me to be successful. The disclosure and frank discussion with my program that resulted was incredibly productive and helpful. Even though I thought of myself as already comfortable with my ADHD diagnosis before all this happened, I don't think that I was really thinking about myself as someone who might need both more time and different than typical approach to get some of the same results as some of my colleagues. The conversations that surrounded my disclosure led to solutions that I would never have imagined on my own.
As this fellow described, having a diagnosis was only part of the story. What made the difference was working in a community that helped them see their needs in a new light and feel empowered to accept assistance that ultimately improved their ability to thrive at work. Dr. Andrea Lindaris, a vascular neurologist at Mount Sinai, had a similar experience. Dr. Landeris has Usher's syndrome, a rare genetic condition that affects both hearing and vision. Throughout her training, Dr. Landeris navigated disclosure and accommodations in a variety of ways. At the start of residency, a new health challenge necessitated a different type of support. In this next story, Dr. Landeris reflects on the role her physician community played in helping her navigate that change and the lasting impact of the support she received during that time.
I was 40 at the time and was diagnosed with DCIS. I had a mastectomy August of my intern year, and then had post-operative complications and needed a revision and further surgery. I remember when I got the diagnosis, I was like at my orientation for internship in June. And I was just dumbfounded. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm already old. I'm already disabled with hearing and vision. And now I'm going to tell them I need to have surgery.
Fortunately, Dr. Landeris' program was able to adjust her schedule so she could get the healthcare she needed. But the emotional weight of navigating the experience stayed with her.
I was okay to work, but I felt very much so that my emotions were right underneath the surface. You know how intern year is, you're exhausted. I would be more tearful if I was tired. I missed some time while my co-interns were practicing and learning and going along.
Dr. Landeris' chief residents observed a change and decided to step in.
They finally just was like, listen, I think you need some more support and there's no shame in it. And I think it's going to really help you. And there's a psychiatrist that's working with our residency program. It's a way for people who need help to take some time out during lunchtime to go over when you're awake and it's daylight and talk. And it's away from campus, so you can shift your mindset and get away from the patients for a little bit. Your senior will hold your pager. It was very much, we got you. We're going to take care of these clinical pieces. And I was a bit hesitant, but in the end, I just felt like I got the counseling piece and the support. And it helped me get over the hump of that PTSD kind of state. So I think that's a beautiful example of how we can be taking care of each other through our residency.
Stories like these remind us that when we create environments where disclosure feels safe, something more than accommodation becomes possible. Disclosure can create connection. It can build trust. It can invite understanding, not only of one another, but of ourselves. And in doing so, it can shape the kind of clinicians we become and the care we offer our patients. Our final story comes from pediatric anesthesiologist Dr. Carla Castro-Frenzel. She reflects on how opening up to others created a sense of community and hope during one of the most difficult chapters of her life.
I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And I knew if I go back to work, I might start looking drastically different if I'm under traditional oncology therapy. And I didn't want people guessing what was going on. And I didn't want someone else controlling the narrative of what was going on with me. I think when you become a patient, that's one of the things that you really, really want. You want to have some kind of control. The autonomy becomes very important. While I was on medical leave, my chairman asked me, do you want me to speak for you? Or I said, no, I want to be the one to. And so I wrote like an email to him for him to say to the thing. And then when I came back from medical leave in morning meeting, I addressed our department and I told them of my diagnosis and that I would be pursuing treatment. And I felt I was really immediately a relief to do that because we're a small children's hospital and we all know each other very well. And everyone was tremendously supportive. Everyone gave me a hug. I felt like the staff was relieved that I was open because they could come up and hug me and say, oh, I'm sorry, I heard. And it was like there was no secret.
For Dr. Castro-Frenzel, disclosure wasn't about accommodations. It was about holding on to autonomy, finding community, and discovering that she didn't have to navigate one of the hardest seasons of her life alone.
For me, I think what was the most helpful aspect was that I was so scared out of my mind that I was on the brink of despair. And when people asked me, how can I help? What can I do? I basically said, can you send anything you can think that could help someone who's on the verge of despair. And so they sent like all kinds of books and things to cheer me up. I think sometimes we're so scared as physicians to let anyone know that we're in a vulnerable spot. But taking that brave step oftentimes results in wonderful things. It's little things, right? Like tiny little bits of conversation, like, their kid's name, or you're asking about their kid's hobby, or they're asking how you're doing. It's just small interactions, like little micro interactions throughout the day. It's community building and friendly, supportive little gestures, that kind of atmosphere that was, I think, so helpful. And just being in that healing environment with a bunch of very caring staff, all the nurses and the techs and people who've seen you for years and appreciate you.
Section 4. What now?
Throughout this series, we've heard from healthcare professionals across specialties, stages of training, and disability identities. And if there's one thing these stories make clear, it's that disclosure rarely follows a single path. For some, disclosure opened the door to support and belonging. For others, it brought uncertainty, misunderstanding, or difficult choices. More often than not, it was both. The decision to disclose is shaped by personal experience, workplace culture, institutional policies, and the relationships that surround us. We began the series by asking who discloses, who seeks accommodations, and why so many people choose not to. The stories we've heard suggest that there are no simple answers, but they do point us toward a few places where change is possible. It begins with systems. When the path to accommodations is clear, transparent, and trustworthy, people are better able to understand their options and make informed decisions about what they need. Uncertainty about how disclosure will be received or who will have access to that information can become a barrier in its own right. Change also requires recognizing that disclosure isn't a single moment. It unfolds across classrooms, clinics, residency programs, and careers. Each new setting asks people to weigh the same questions again. Is it safe? Will I be understood? Will asking for support change how I'm seen? Institutions have an opportunity to meet that reality with processes that are flexible, consistent, and built to support people over time. And, perhaps most importantly, these stories remind us that culture matters. Policies create opportunities for access, but people create the conditions for trust. Again and again, we heard how a supervisor, a colleague, a mentor, or a peer made the difference. Not by having all the answers, but by listening, asking thoughtful questions, and responding with respect. These moments don't erase stigma, but they can make disclosure feel a little less risky. They can make medicine feel a little more human. To everyone who shared their story with us, thank you. Your experiences have given voice to the complexity of disability disclosure and invited all of us to think more carefully about what it means to support one another. And if you see yourself in these stories, we hope you leave knowing this. Whatever your path, you are not alone. Thank you for listening to Disclosure. This series is supported by a grant from the Ford Foundation, the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge everyone whose insights, contributions, guidance, and ideas helped bring this series to life. While we couldn't include every narrative we received, every story and perspective shared with us helped shape the narratives we ultimately told. We are deeply grateful to everyone who generously shared their experiences and insights with us.